1 minute, or maybe 2. Welcome to YouTube, we're talking Doctor Who. For you.
Hello and welcome back to TMDWP. This episode is going to perform a twofold purpose. The first is to introduce what is now going to be a short series on Faith and Doctor Who that I've been promising for the best part of, well, more than a year now, in fact. And the second is to briefly comment on the situation with the new companion and what we've seen from the past and what I'm hoping for the future. But first, let's kick off with the Faith in Doctor Who. Last time I was at Gallifrey in 2015, there was a great panel led by Chip of the 2 Minute Time Lord called Faith in Fantasy, I believe it was, which was an interesting panel made up entirely of Christians of different stripes talking about their own interactions with Doctor Who, which I found interesting. What I also found interesting was the Q&A, because the people who were asking questions were not Christians, so it was interesting to kind of see that interaction. For me, one of the things that I learned was a Jewish perspective on Inferno. I didn't know there was one, but this guy in the audience pointed out that, well, as he read the story, that Sir Keith Gold was supposed to be Jewish, and therefore that Professor Stahlman was an anti-Semite. This was an aspect of the story that I had never seen and would probably never have picked up on it unless a Jewish person had pointed it out to me. The other point was that I particularly remember there was an atheist who asked a question, basically saying how this was something that she had never thought of, being an atheist, really not understanding Christians interacting with Doctor Who. And you may remember back when I was doing my Advent series, there was someone who sent in a question, Dr. Cryptic, I think it was, on Twitter, who said, how can you be a Christian and be a fan of Doctor Who? And I talked a bit about those issues at the time. And you can go back and look at that and see what I said then. And specifically, one of the stories that was brought up was the Rings of Akaten. And so in thinking about this and reflecting on it, I have stuff that I would like to say. So I'll just fill you in on what the two episodes that I'm going to do are, and you may be able to contribute if you want to send me an email, min_dw@yahoo.co.uk, with some thoughts beforehand, and I will try and incorporate people's feedback. So the first is looking at the Rings of Akaten as a particular case study of what exactly is the philosophy on which Doctor Who stands. I don't think, because it's such a wide show and so many people have run it, I don't think there is a definitive answer to that, but I think it certainly skews very heavily in one direction, and I'd like to explore that. And then another episode, which I think will be the first one I do, on, well, what does Doctor Who have to say about faith? And what do particular writers who have engaged with the topic, what do they believe? What do I believe, and how does that affect my enjoyment of those stories? And in particular, what I'm going to draw out is, what do The Curse of Fenric and its thematic sequel, The God Complex, what do those two stories have to say about faith? And what do I think? So let's talk about companions. We have the new companion Bill, who we don't know much about. We know the actress is a contemporary Londoner. The character might not be. I'm hoping that she isn't. And I thought I would put this into a bit of context by looking at what we've seen in the past. And the show does split itself into some very distinct phases, I feel. You start with the 60s, where, with the brief exception of Ben and Polly, and Dodo in the War Machines, and then a few stories afterwards, the Doctor always has at least one companion who is either an alien, his granddaughter, or is non-contemporary, from Vicky right through to Zoe. And then the show does a complete change when it goes into colour. You have 7 years of purely contemporary companions before we then flip again, and you have from Leela through to Turlough, you have another bunch of companions who are either not from contemporary times or are not human. And then the final bit of the classic series, and then the TV movie, and then most of the new series, you have the solo female contemporary companion, many of whom are from London. That is to do the new series a slight disservice, because it has tried some different things. We had Adam, very briefly. We had Jack, slightly less briefly, but still briefly, returning, getting his own show. We do have River Song cropping up now and again. We do have the Paternoster gang. So we do have these semi-regular characters who aren't contemporary, who are alien. What I would love to see is a series where the Doctor's main companion, who travels with him all the time, is either from the past or the future, or isn't human. And from what we know of Bill so far, she could be any of those things. I'm hoping she's at least one of them.
Just 1 minute to talk about Doctor Who. Just 1 minute, or maybe two. Welcome to YouTube.